Koby's actually kinda lucky he's not a fruit user, or he might no longer be a life user. Hello humans of the world, I'm Dawn of the World, welcome aboard. My course is pretty much finishing in like 2 weeks, so expect the normal chaos between now and then. Hopefully I can work on my new filming location between now and then, because this is not going to be it. My camera and my mic and everything is set up along my bed, and that's just not sustainable. But let's get into the discussion, shall we? We are going to be seeing Vegapunk very soon now. His handiwork, his influence, his essence was all over this chapter. I'm talking pacifistas, I'm talking lineage factor, I'm talking sea stone paddle boats, I'm talking Egghead Island. Sorry, I meant Egghead Port. Let's take a look. We have what seem to be pacifista clones of Mihawk and Hancock, which are still in their childhood infused with Lunarian lineage factor. That's a lot. In fact, that was nowhere on my 2022 One Piece bingo cards. Props to you if that was. And I tell you what, those Vince Mock boys walked so these babies could fly. And I reckon that the more and more convoluted the experiments and technology that the Marines come out with are, the closer and closer to Vegapunk we're approaching, to the point where I think we could be on his doorstep. And his doorstep is Egghead Port. But more on that in a moment, let's talk about the Lunarian pacifista Shichibukai babies. Something I overlooked on my first read is that based on his reaction, Blackbeard seems to know of the existence of Lunarians, and the fact that two seem to be standing before him has shaken him. Which is funny because normally it's the other way around. Normally it's him who's shaking things because of his fruit has got the earthquake fruit and earthquakes make things shake, and he's shaking the yolk. I also found this to be an interesting piece of writing because here Blackbeard is having the same reaction to this as us, the readers. He's discovering this information that these are pacifistas, that they have the Lunarian lineage factor, that they seem to be clones of ex-Shichibukai at the same time as us. So in this scene, Blackbeard of all characters is kind of acting as the character that we as the readers relate with, because we are sharing this experience of this crazy discovery with him. As for how he knows about the Lunarians, I don't know if the existence of Lunarians is a well-known fact. However, it totally checks out that Blackbeard would know about them, being as well-read a man as he is. I mean, after all, it was said by Shakky a long time ago that knowledge is power. And sidebar on the mention of Shakky, we now have it confirmed that she was the Empress of Amazon Lily 2 generations ago. Sidebar, I saw somebody on Twitter contemplating that the Empress 1 generation ago could have been Crocodile, and that is definitely one of the theories of all time, and I heard it, so you all have to hear it. Anyway, it doesn't overly surprise me that Shakky does have this connection with Amazon Lily. I think it was implied, like, at the end of the pre-time skip that she and Elder Neon had some kind of connection, that they knew each other somehow, and even back then I noticed that they kind of resemble each other. I mean, obviously they are not the same age, but they certainly resemble each other. They have the same eyes, maybe they're sisters or a mother and daughter or something like that. Elder Nyon was the Empress who preceded Shakky after all, and then Shakky was succeeded by a Crocodile who was succeeded by Hancock. We've just yet to have it confirmed. But continuing this stream of thoughts on Shakky, I had for a while kind of thought that she was or could have been part of the Rocks Pirates, especially after Oda gave a very Oda-ish answer to something in an SBS, but that could have just been him trying to throw us. Well, consider me throwing. Although both these truths could coexist, she could have joined the Roxas pirate crew at a later point, especially if we approach from the possibility that such an eclectic group as the Rocks were formed through means of a Davy back fight. At the very least, Shakky and the Rocks crew were contemporaries, keeping in mind that Shakky is in her 60s and the Rocks crew were active 40 plus years ago. At the very least, from a storytelling perspective, she would have interacted with them in some kind of way. She definitely met Rocks at some point, but that's probably going to be for another time. Now, stepping away from the Shakky tangent and back into the Blackbeard and pacifista bar, if Mihawk and Hancock have been cloned and made into these pacifistas with Lunarian lineage factor, then it's incredibly likely that some of the other ex-warlords have as well. In this case, I'm wondering if all of the ex-warlords have been cloned or if it was only some of them. Was the possibility crossing Blackbeard's mind here that he himself might have a genetically modified clone out there somewhere? I think plenty of us have wondered about, for example, say Crocodile, if we'll see a little crocodile at some point, or even a little girl crocodile, since it's kind of implied that Ivankov may have transitioned him into a man at some point, and before this he might have been an empress of Amazon Lily, but we don't want to go counting all our our eggs before they hatch. But personally, I would love to see a little Buggy clone get this kind of mini Lunarian pacifista cross guild thing going on. Shit, this is really weird. For some reason, I wrote the words Buggy the clone down in some notes somewhere a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure why I did that, but I did. And now it's like possibly actually going to be a thing. I hope that he adopts his clone. End of the series, we have Buggy the clown and his son Buggy the clone. Also, a little Lunarian pacifista Jinbei would be really interesting. For one thing, it'd be interesting to see how Lunarian lineage factor would interact with a fishman rather than a human. And for another thing, Jinbei is one of the Straw Hats, so it'll be interesting to see how that factors into the story, since if he exists, it's very likely that they're going to cross paths, and that could be some interesting plot there for his character. Is anyone else unsurprised that Hancock's abilities don't work on Koby, by the way? This whole scene between Hancock, Blackbeard, and Koby was really cool because we have this conflict on three fronts. We have the Marines here to collect Hancock, we have Hancock standing up against them, and we have Blackbeard rocking up in that uninvited third-party style that is truly iconic to him. He is, of course, also after Hancock and fundamentally at odds with the Marines for a variety of different reasons. Also, is anyone else getting kind of frustrated continuously hearing about the Rocky Port incident but still not knowing exactly what happened? We keep hearing these snippets of anecdotes about it because the characters who converse about it all know what happened. They're all in on it, but we're all outsiders. It happened during the 2 years. None of the Straw Hats were there. It seems to be another one of those incidences that may have involved conflict on multiple fronts, possibly some temporary truces between enemy groups, and a bunch of other stuff, but it really kind of deserves its own discussion there. It was also interesting that Rayleigh admitted to the fact that he wouldn't be able to win against Blackbeard and his crew in this day. And this makes sense as well, because while Rayleigh would still be unquantifiably strong against the average person, his glory days of being at his peak are now behind him, whereas Blackbeard is there right now. He was able to prevent Blackbeard and co from taking Hancock and was able to send them off the island without further scuffle, but he wasn't able to extend that protection of sorts to the Marines, which is why Koby has been captured, which I think is going to be integral to the upcoming arc. Well, this is a bit more of a pickle than he was in back in the day with Alvida. I think this is really cool because pre-time skip we had a pirate who was captured by the Marines, and now we have a Marine who's been captured by pirates. Marines having bounties assigned to them is a new prospect in the story, so the possibility of Koby being turned into Cross Guild is there, in which case Koby will sort of be in captivity under Alvida again. Nostalgic, innit? But it's also possible that Blackbeard might have something else in mind. Maybe wants to make an example of him in some kind of way. Like I said at the start, Koby is lucky he's not a fruit user, but I don't doubt he'll be worse for wear when we next see him. So to segue back into the kind of Vegapunk-esque theme of this video, there's of course the place from which the Marines are making this report of Koby's capture, just off Egghead Port where they're about to dock. This seems as though it could be a port of the island on which Vegapunk resides. For one thing, there's the name. From what little we've seen of Vegapunk, his head seems to be more elliptical in shape than the average person, so having him reside somewhere with this name seems kind of fitting. And the term Egghead is also used to describe someone very academia or science-minded or like a nerd. And furthermore, it makes sense that a marine ship that is carrying two of Vegapunk's recent creations will be returning to Vegapunk's lab after what's likely their first mission, making sure everything's tip-top and whatnot. And a side note, I've only become more certain that while they were in Wano, Frankie added sea stone to the hull of the Sunny and that they'll need to use it someday. But anyway, as for other aspects of this chapter, something else entirely that struck me was the, I wouldn't say retconning, but the backtracking in sorts of Oda following up the Yamato and Marco plots. I understand that people were vexed by Yamato's seemingly sudden decision to stay in Wano, with the arbitrary excuse that Odin explored Wano before he explored the world, and were also vexed by Marco and Luffy's lack of interaction, given the role that Marco played at Marineford in helping rescue Luffy and all of that. So it was great to see in this chapter that Oda kind of went back and amended these via flashback. We get a decent interaction between Luffy and Marco that gives you exactly what we'd been wanting to see. Yes, as well as a much more solid reasoning as to Yamato's choice to stay behind, along with the implication that the reasoning we were given before was basically a cover-up reason so to not hurt Momo's pride. I feel as though originally and ideally we would have seen these two conversations take place in real time, or rather not in a flashback. We would have seen them as they happened, but since it's a not so well kept secret that Oda has been pressured to have the ending of Wano coincide with the release of Film Red, meaning that the story had to kind of take a backseat because, you know, Gomu Gomu no cash grab. These two events have been pushed into a flashback at the start of the next arc, which is far better than not including them at all, and was honestly the best choice given the given circumstances. Something I didn't fully understand about Marco's dialogue here though was that he describes himself as being far too old and worn out to babysit pirates like the redhairs, despite the fact a quick look into his wiki says he's 45 years old, which is well within the age range of the Shanks crew. There's also the possibility that 45 might be just how old he looks. I mean, with his regenerative phoenix abilities, he could be older. But he's probably just being a facetious bastard. Let me know what you guys thought of the chapter, and I'm going to work on the beast that is setting up the studio space in the next door study that is filled with decades worth of stuff. I'm Dawn of the World, and I will see you next time. Later, guys.